All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome to the screening room. Today on the show, we are joined by a talent acquisition veteran. We have Saqib here. Hey, Saqib.
Hi, nice to be here. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks. So Saqib basically as head of business recruitment for Rippling India. He's led a team that has quadrupled the company's workforce in just 18 months. They've hit every hiring goal and unbelievable, but they've locked in a 92% offer acceptance rate, right? I mean, that's incredible. And before Rippling, Saqib helped launch and scale Revolut in India. He was employee number five, and when I think he left, there were 1,000 member strong team, right? And Saqib ran multiple global recruiting functions. Apart from these roles, he's also a career advisor at Mesa School of Business, and so he teaches the next wave of talent leaders there. If you care about scaling teams fast and doing it right, this is the right show for you. It's I think Saqib's playbook should help all talent acquisition leaders. So Saqib, let's start with the basic hygiene stuff, right? We'll do a quick introduction about your educational and professional background. Let's say right up to the time you joined Rippling.
Yeah, sure. Thank you so much, Jayant. I actually am a Bombay boy, born and brought up
Okay.
and lived in Mumbai all my life. Moved to Bangalore for playing. So it's been like close to 20, 22 odd months that I've been in this city. I'm an MBA in finance. I come from a banking family. My father, grandfather, they were all bankers and investment bankers. So naturally, there was this inclination to do something in finance. And
Hmm.
hence, I ended up joining HDFC Bank as my first stint through campus. I actually started out as a product manager. So I've had a very unconventional journey.
Yeah.
Started out in product, did that for 3.5 years, close to almost 4 years, and then wanted to move out and do something very, very different. I knew banking is not my thing. It
Yeah.
may run in the blood, but probably it should stop with me. Super boring desk job, but obviously learned quite a lot. If you're working with the largest banker of the country, you'd definitely get opportunities to learn and grow. So it was a great stint, but I realized quickly that that's not what I want to do in my career. So I
Mhm.
joined Michael Page, and that was actually my first ever recruiting stint. So I joined as a recruitment consultant, was there for slightly less than 2 years, worked with some of the big fintechs today, like some of the popular names, but back then these were pretty small up and coming startups. Helped them hire some of their executives, worked with quite a lot of PVCs and some banks and NBFCs as well. And then when Revolut came calling, I wanted to obviously give that a shot because I knew at some point I wanted to move it to in-house talent acquisition and help one business grow and hire. Revolut was not unfamiliar for me because I was working with fintechs in India who used to aspire to become the next Stripe and Monzo and Revolut in India.
Mhm.
So I'd heard of them. They were already a unicorn in the UK, by the way, but obviously they didn't exist in India, so nobody knew about them. And I knew it's a good opportunity to come in as the first ever TA for them in India. So I joined, and I joined when we didn't have an office, had no idea what we'll do. And like those 3 years were crazy. Joined as employee number five, as you said, and scaled it up to more than 1,000 odd folks working for Revolut from India, but for global operations, and helped build the entire Revolut India leadership team and worked with our CEO of India, Paroma Chatterjee, very closely to build that up. So did that, and then I realized I wanted to like do something beyond financial services because that's
Mhm.
what I'd done throughout my career. And SaaS was obviously exciting. As an HR, you would always want to, stay close to your product, and HR tech was super, interesting, and it was obviously a growing space. Even now is, but 2, 3 years back, obviously it was much more newer, at least for Indian markets. And Rippling had this interesting proposition where, we wanted to like sort of go from being just a tech hub in India to more of a larger setup, like an extended office from
Uh,
US to India. So we had to like, the mandate was to build up the entire non-tech org for us. So when I joined Rippling, it was just a base of 300, 350 employees that we had in Bangalore. And
mhm.
today, as you said, like we've almost quadrupled that. We are close to 1,300 folks in like a year
Right.
and a half. And almost 75, 80% of that has, majority of the growth has been on the non-technical side. So yeah, I've been fortunate to play a part, to that growth story. And my own team like went from 2, 3 member recruiting org to today, like having 10 members,
I see.
that kind of do that job. So yeah, that's been my journey.
Okay. So let's recap, right? So you said you started with finance, and then you did HR, and then you did fintech, and now you're doing HR tech, right?
Yeah.
So you started doing more services in both, and then you've done tech in both. Okay, so that's the that's the journey you've taken. Um, all right, and
Yeah.
most of the audience will be talent acquisition folks, so they absolutely should know Rippling. But for those people who have been living under, in a cave and who do not know what Rippling does, can you tell us a bit about what Rippling does?
Uh, Rippling, basically, for those who don't know, it's like a one-stop solution for all things related to managing employee data. So typically your HCM, payroll, IT spend all in one. It's not just an HRMS tool anymore. So like that's what we built. And, typically, traditionally HR has been a very sort of a backward, sort of an ecosystem in terms of how data is managed and how people take care of things. HRs have had to use hundreds of various tools for different for talent acquisition, different for benefits, for payroll, for time off, etc. So
Yeah.
Rippling has created this one-stop solution which helps out for almost everything that someone can think of for employee data. For simpler understanding, it's the closest example or comparison we can think of is Salesforce. So how Salesforce has created one ecosystem that all kind of toss things back to customer data and builds
Mm-hmm.
products and third-party apps on top of that,
Mm-hmm.
thinking about customer data at the core of it. Rippling
Mm-hmm.
has created a similar ecosystem with employee data at the core of it. So anything that you can think of that goes back to employee data at the core of it, and like we can kind of build products and features related to that is what like Rippling has created.
Got it. So I obviously, because I'm in the same space, I read a lot about Rippling and so on, right? One of the coolest things I read, I think this was a year or two ago, is when you guys onboard employees, you have this thing where laptops are shipped and they're shipped with, the relevant software and the authentication. It's
Yeah.
crazy, right? That, that kind of automation happens. And then, I mean, I don't know how much the employee would like it that on day one they have to start working. But as a founder, I'd love it if day one people, are logging into the right system, they do the right tools, everything is
Yeah.
set up for them. I think it's incredible that such a like an offline hardware kind of thing has been
Yeah.
automated. I think that's very
That's
cool.
that's that's a great point. Honestly, that was my aha moment as an employee
I
when
see.
I joined. So when I joined on my first day, I got this laptop. I opened up my MacBook. All I had to do was obviously sign in and create my account, but
Yeah,
everything else was already there. The tools
yeah,
I need, the accesses I need based
yeah,
on my role, my permissions, my designation, and my level, everything was automated. So
yeah.
it like goes back to that same point of like
Hmm.
connecting everything based on employee data just makes things super simple in like less than a minute before someone joins. A manager or recruiting manager, whoever's like hiring them in
Yeah,
Rippling, has to do all of that. And the moment someone joins and they get this device, it's all
yeah,
interconnected. So it's super seamless in that way. And like most people, when they join, they expect, oh my God, it's going to take five
yeah,
days just to like sort
yeah,
out my, accesses and everything. And they realize, oh, it's a 5-minute job. And like
yeah,
that's like the first point of like realization that they've joined a very unique place right
yeah.
now.
I mean, it sounds cool in my head, so I'm sure when you saw it live in action, it would have been incredible. So, like I said, you've done talent consultancy, you've done fintech, you've done HRMS tools now. Um, what did you like and dislike about the previous two companies that you worked at?
So I think in terms of being a talent consultant, what I really enjoyed was purely the exposure to working directly with the founders of various
Mhm.
fintechs and access to connect with some of the top CXOs that a brand like Michael Page gave me.
Mhm.
That obviously I wouldn't get. It's like an unparalleled
Yeah.
experience. And to get that in your first ever recruiting job is also unheard of. So I got super lucky and I was at the right place at the right time when the fintech ecosystem was booming. And without naming any names, some of these fintechs are like amongst the top 5, top 6 like fintechs in India right now. So
Mm.
I got to work with their founders directly when they were super young. They just
Yeah.
raised their seed, pre-series A kind of funding,
Hmm.
15, 20 member teams, and I'm hiring their CFOs,
Yeah.
CEOs, and head of ops. And I'm a
Yeah.
first-time recruiter myself. So like I also
Yeah.
understand very little of recruiting, but that
Hmm.
exposure, that challenge pushed me to the core and obviously had a lot of fun. With Revolut, obviously it's a global giant. Just that opportunity of learning how a large global recruitment machine works. They had more than 150 people in recruiting globally,
Hmm.
which is like size of
Yeah.
some organizations in India,
Yeah.
even at
Yeah.
Series B or Series C
Yeah.
stage. So just
Yeah.
to like work with that large machine and understand hiring and how pretty much every large country in the world hires, because I had the opportunity to hire across Europe, America, Asia, Middle East, and various countries within that. I've even hired in like Cyprus and Ukraine and all of these
Wow.
countries where the talent pool itself was only 20 member
Mm-hmm.
employees, candidates that you could tap into. So like that exposure, obviously, I really enjoyed. And again, like you rarely get these exposures sitting in India in
Yeah.
a small place. And then in terms of what I think could have been better, agency setups typically come with a lot of focus on closing roles
Mm-hmm.
because that's how they'll earn revenue
Yeah.
through commissions, etc., because that's their north star. So aim was to always close faster
Yeah.
rather than like think about, okay, build a team for someone and have
Mm-hmm.
that goal about hiring right people, etc. Not to say they don't hire good people, but it's always
Yeah.
the north star. Like the moat is always just close someone or find people before any other agency finds,
Yeah.
because that's what you're chasing. So that's something that I think could probably change in the agency ecosystem. And I think at Revolut, there weren't a lot of things that I felt could have been better. But if I have to pick one, I think a large company like Revolut, or today they have more than 10,000 employees. It's also difficult. But I think at some point I felt we could have had like a standardized work culture across countries. What
Uh,
happens is like because each country is so different from the other Revolut ecosystems, the kind of work models, just the expectations of stakeholders, they were so different that as a recruiter sitting in one country and having to hire across 20
I
different
see.
countries, it made it super challenging to understand, like for that same role in two different countries, the
Yeah.
expectations could be poles apart. So I
Got
think
it.
that was one of the biggest challenges there. But again, I won't say it has to be standardized, but if a world exists where it could be
Yeah.
standardized, that would have
Yeah.
been a lot more simpler.
Yeah, very good. That's very nuanced. Thanks. That's useful. So we've still talking about your history, right? And so I know that when you did, as you just said, you helped a lot of startups hire. So there you were part of the 0 to 1 kind of journey. But in general, HDFC and Michael Page and Revolut and then everything, as a full-time employee, it's been, with scale startups. Is that accidental? Is it by choice? Is there any FOMO about not doing much of 0 to 1?
Uh, I get it. I get this question a lot, and I would say first of all, God has been kind. I've been like
Hmm.
very lucky to be at the right place at the right time, and just
Hmm.
like by His grace, got to work with some of the biggest brands that most people dream of. I think to answer the question more directly, it is definitely by choice. I am
Hmm.
super conscious about my career decisions, and that's also
Hmm.
one of the things I feel people in India need to spend more time thinking about. A lot of candidates I talk to these days, I feel, bro, what were you up to? Like, you could have thought about this move at least
Hmm.
twice, if not more. And
Hmm.
people like join a new company and in 10 days they start regretting, which shows
Yeah.
that they didn't probably thought it through or whatever. So
Yeah.
I am someone who like, thinks about, my moves at least for like a couple of months, if not like more.
Hmm.
And I will like, speak to hundreds of people and analyze hundreds of
Yeah.
different angles. One of my early learnings was to also think about exit options. If something doesn't go well, what are your
Hmm.
plans? Where will
Hmm.
you go? How will you go? What will you do, etc. And a lot of people don't realize, but each move sort of either helps you grow 10x in your career or just like sort of
Yeah.
decelerates your
Yeah.
career trajectory. So every decision I've made, I've thought about, will this help me 10x, like my
Hmm.
growth, my learning, just the overall, like,
Yeah.
financial angle
Trajectory.
and all of
Yeah.
that. Yeah. So that's one. So it's always definitely been by choice. Secondly, you may feel I've not had a chance to do 0 to 1, and I constantly have to argue with people that I did. One obviously was with Michael Page, but it was more indirect where I was helping founders to hire. But again, it was just as a consultant. But even Revolut, although I understand they were a global brand and they were
Hmm.
already a fintech in the UK, in India, nobody had heard of Revolut. So it
Yeah.
was like joining as the first ever TA, other than I think Paroma, who was the CEO, and she was already in the process and she got
Yeah.
hired a couple of months after I joined. Everyone else, I had to hire, like, I had to start
Yeah.
off by, like, and for a quite a long period, I actually operated as a single recruiter. I didn't even have a team. I joined as an IC. I was an IC. I had peers who worked with me. They didn't report into me. So it was always like work with people to help build this. And then
Hmm.
eventually I stepped up and I got a chance. So like the first 50 to 75 odd people were just my individual hires with zero agency support. We never worked with external vendors. So I did that part of 0 to 1. And there is always that FOMO that I have not done like a real 0 to 1.
Yeah.
And hopefully soon I will get a chance to do that as well. I hope I get to, because there's this like regret that I have, that I've not like
Mhm.
really worked with an Indian founder working
Yeah.
like, just seed pre-series A stage kind of a, setup where I'm having to work with them, slog, try to find
Yeah.
people, build teams, etc., with very little opportunity to sell. Because I understand some may argue that you always had Revolutes and the Ripplings kind of a brands that you could
Mhm.
use to sell, and it's easier to convince candidates. So I always have that feeling that I want to challenge myself and do that. So hopefully at some point I will do that. But the reason why I did all of these moves were basically because I knew there's not a better place in the world to learn about how global recruitment machines work other than like brands like Rippling, Revolut, Atlassian, etc. Because they have some like elite recruiting practices. And some of these things that they do, I think 99% of the companies in India, they can't even think about those things. It's obviously a massive cultural difference, but beyond that, also just the way they operate, the way they source profiles, the way recruitment teams are structured, etc. All of those nuances. So I wanted to go super deep there, build an expertise. And today I feel I'm probably in a position where if I have to even do like a 0 to 1 or another 1 to 10, I will probably be in a position to leverage that experience and like do something great here.
Okay, very good. Yeah, I mean, the Revolut thing, you're right. I think it's doing you a disservice to say that you've not done 0 to 1. But there's also obviously Talent Deck, right? So you've been involved
Yeah.
with their journey from the very beginning. Maybe just tell, I think, again, because a lot of the listeners will be people in talent acquisition. So they obviously have heard of TTD. So maybe a bit about how you got involved initially and what you're most excited to about TTD itself.
Yeah, TTD is something which is super close to my heart. And big shout out to Sophie, Ashish, Alex, Taha, and all of these people who, have been a big part of what TTD is today. Very coincidentally, TTD, when Taha and Sophie and Ashish got together and started thinking about building a community of sorts for the talent world, because we knew there was GrowthX, there is the product folks. So like each like function had something of their own and talent didn't. And talent has always also been super orthodox in their approaches. So we wanted to do something great for our people and for ourselves, so that we can also like share knowledge and learn from each other. And I was thinking of doing something very coincidentally. At the same time, Taha reached out, and I didn't know them, they didn't know me. They just saw my profile and they reached out saying, "Hey, we are thinking of doing something. Would you be interested in joining hands?" And I was like, "What are you saying?" I was literally thinking about doing something similar because I was part of GrowthX. I was like, thinking of building something similar myself. We got together. This is like, I think if I'm not wrong, I was the fourth person that joined them beyond the three founders. I was the first non founder that like sort of got together with them, and then they brought in 3 4 other people who kind of made the core team of TTD. The agenda was simple. We don't want to make money. We just want to like create a room for like-minded people to come together, share our thoughts and views about what's happening in the ecosystem, and just share our learnings and help each other out. And we started off thinking of logos and what should the name be, because this is back when we hadn't even figured we'll call it TTD. So yeah, I've been part of it since those days. And today it's a pretty big community that everybody knows of, at least in Bangalore. So kudos to these guys who've like worked super hard to ensure this brand scales to that level without ever thinking of like monetizing that, because that's the first thing everyone thinks of the moment you gain
Yeah.
popularity. And they're all like amazing people. They're all doing great in their career. So they've never really had to like think of monetizing as well. And that's never been their goal too. But yeah, that's how I got associated. And that's also why I'm super excited about it.
Yeah, very good. I mean, we've been associated with them for a bit. I know Supi very well. And
Yeah.
so, I mean, look, I'm a business guy, right? So for me, a community of people who do talent acquisition, that's gold mine, right? So when you're doing startups, you should know where your ICP hangs out. And you know exactly where they hang out. At those bars that TTD is running events on, that's exactly where they hang out. So you just go there. So um, okay, so coming back to Rippling then. So we know, you've done sort of hyper growth recruiting, right? Maybe so that people can relate to it. Is there like a single hiring story from Rippling India's journey that captures the pace and pressure and eventually the payoff of this hyper growth recruiting?
I think quite a few. I think two major ones that I can call out. One related to our customer experience department's growth, and the other one related to our sales functions growth. The customer experience org, I think when I joined, was close to around 50-ish people. And today, in like close to a year, 15 months of like, working with them, we are at around 450 odd folks just in the customer support org. So what happens is, as the company scales, especially in B2B SaaS, you would understand that your sales team is growing, they get more clients. There are like more requests for having higher number of support reps that can like take care of these tickets. So it's like a domino effect. Rippling is growing at 70% year on year, even at this scale. So it gets tough to always have enough number of people on seats to kind of support the incoming customer requests. Plus, we are launching new products and new features every month and every quarter. So there's that constant demand of, okay, do we have enough people who understand these new products to be able to support customers that come with these requests? The other big differentiating factor is that Rippling has a very, very high talent bar. And
Mm-hmm.
we'll talk more about that in a few minutes. I'll share more insights around that as well, to whatever extent I can
Yeah.
share non-confidential information. So even for hiring, like with no disrespect meant to customer support, but it's meant to be a role for an early career professional, right? You don't need to think too much about who we hire as long as they have good communication skills and they are like right in their head and can manage, irate customers and all of that. But even for a customer support rep, Rippling has a very, very high talent bar wherein we only look for people who are super sharp, who are super smart, who can manage like customer requests and queries from North American markets at like 2 a.m. at night and stuff like that. So one, that quality bar, the talent bar itself is too high. Secondly, as I said, because we are growing so fast, we can't compromise on speed. So you have to take care of quality, but at the same time, you have to be fast and like, quick enough to hire. There came a point where we had to hire like more than 50 people every like sort of 2 months, so like roughly around 25 to 30 people every month. It's almost like getting at least one hire every day. And this is also a bar which, you know, by the nature of the kind of role and the kind of people who end up doing these jobs early in their careers, it's a high volume game by default. It's not like product or a strategy role where, only select people apply or whatever. So there are hundreds and thousands of applications of which you have to like pick and choose who actually gets through. So there came a point where we had to hire like more than 30 people per month, and we did that, and today we are like an org of 450 odd folks. We then did a campus drive, and this year also we are kind of running campus drives, and we are aiming to hire more than 250 people for next year already just through campus.
Wow.
And we figured that like the best folks for this role for Rippling in India, we'll only be able to get through campus rather than through like
Mm-hmm.
lateral hires through industry, because most other companies, when they hire customer support reps, they don't really care so much about like quality and the bar of talent and all of that, whereas we do here at Rippling. So we were quick to figure out that this talent will need to be nurtured, and it's a pool which does not exist in the market. We'll have to create from scratch. So we started doing that 6 months back, and today we're in a good position. So yeah, that's one big like example of how pace plus just the pressure is
Yeah.
super important. And the other one I was talking about is sales, where, as I said, like Rippling has very high ambitions and we're growing super fast. And that will only kind of continue for the long term if we continue to grow at the rate that we have. And as you keep growing, the denominator is also growing. So to maintain that growth percentage and endurance at that level is also super difficult. And we figured very early on that our sales machine cannot have like one quarter which can be a miss for them, and every quarter they have to sort of like overachieve their goals or whatever in order to reach there, because it's a pretty lofty goal that we've set for ourselves. When I came on board, back then our sales org was roughly around like 40 odd people across both the SDR org and the account executive org. And today it's close to 100 odd people. We now have new teams that never existed before. We have account managers as well here. We have solutions consultant as well. We have pre-sales enablement people as well. And all of that, we've had to like work very, very hard. And this is again the exact opposite of what we did for customer support. So like these are two very different ends of the spectrum. This one is just quality and like no volume focus at all, because you have to pick and choose some of the best folks. To give you like just one insight on the number, we've probably looked at more than 1,000 account executives from India's B2B SaaS ecosystem or other tech ecosystem overall, in order to pick and choose the 40 that we wanted to hire
Wow.
over the last 1 year. So
Okay.
like it's the talent bar is that high. So yeah.
And so here you're saying it's mostly lateral. You're saying that's the difference in strategy, right? Because you've
Yeah,
seen that these are also people who are mostly selling into the North American market
correct.
at different companies, perhaps.
Yeah.
I see. Okay. That's crazy though. I mean, for 40 out of 1,000 is so you must have very, and you're saying you also have to grow fast, so you cannot wait too long.
Yeah.
But have you observed if it's been easier to close now because maybe Rippling's getting more popular in the Indian
Yeah.
HR ecosystem and so on? Is that been easier?
Yeah, 100%. So again, like 20 months back when I came on board, Rippling was popular amongst engineers, but not
Hmm.
so much amongst the GTM folks, because they'd never heard of them. We didn't hire a ton of people. So my first job was to ensure we work on the employer branding bit. We make enough noise on LinkedIn and other platforms where people get to know about what Rippling is, what we do, how large are we, why are we even hiring, the kind of people we hire, some success stories of folks who've come in and do well and all of that. And the first few months was just kind of parallelly spent on building a solid brand and like just like the values and the ethos and all of that that people could relate to, and then work on the rest of the bit, which is to like create solid sourcing strategies and know what are the talent pools we want to tap into and hire from, etc.
Got it. That's interesting. See, I've never worked at any company, forget large company, right? So this employer branding thing is interesting to me. So how does that work? Right? You're right. So if more people know about you, obviously you're top of the funnel, and
Yeah.
even the quality in the top of the funnel is better.
Yeah.
So you've just joined. What happens then? You figure out, okay, I think if more people know about Rippling, it'll be easier to hire. So on LinkedIn, you can post about Rippling and so on. So maybe your team can do a little bit. Do you also go to maybe the marketing team? Do you also tell them the PR team? And do you say not just for your own business purposes, but also for hiring, this would be useful? How does that conversation go?
Yeah, so a lot of things. I think one, so you play the marketing angle of like making a lot more noise through the official handle of Rippling and talking more about what Rippling is to a local market like India, because a lot of what Rippling does is primarily North America focused, because that's where we primarily sell. Almost 80-85% of our customer base comes from US and Canada. So naturally the effort goes into there. So we then recently had someone join us who kind of focused just on recruitment, branding, and marketing. That would take care of like creating employee stories, share more about the kind of events we host here, participate in events, sponsor some events where we can come across as like an employer that is doing and taking a lot of efforts to ensure our employees are happy, make a lot of noise about the kind of benefits we provide and stuff like that. And then from the recruiter's point of view as well, so there's this very crazy nuance that recruiters within the fraternity know, but a lot of other folks don't really understand that so easily, which is also that a lot of candidates have this crazy amount of trust with recruiters that they have had a relationship with. So much so that if I today call someone and tell them, hey, I have a job for you, would you be interested? They won't care so much whether about it's like Rippling or a Revolut or a Page. As long as Saqib is calling them, they will be keen because Saqib has worked with them for the last 7 years. I may have helped them get a job like 8 years back somewhere, and they still have that sort of respect for me. And that relationship where they would have referred 10 other people later on, and I would have hired a few of them, etc. So, like to sort of create my own personal brand as a recruiter, and then obviously, leverage Rippling's brand along with that and combine it, that like gives you a very strong ammo to kind of go after the right people who then not only are interested in Rippling because it's Rippling, but also because it's you as a personal brand that has like sort of worked on that. So I like worked with my entire team to kind of build that their own personal brands as well to a level where people sort of respect them for who they are, irrespective of like who they are working for or employed by. And then when they obviously have great opportunities, nobody is going to like turn them down. And the obvious fact is that it is rippling at the end of the day. So like, it is a big brand, it's super popular. People may not know us, but as long as we keep giving them and feeding them the right bits of information about our growth, our stability, our strong financials, etc., they then obviously buy into that idea that it is obviously a good place for them to like consider. But all of that does not come super naturally. It takes a lot of constant effort. There's this thing that Rippling used to do, which recently in popularity, which is to post a picture of every new hire that used to join us on Monday, with the recruiter and the hiring manager. That used to be like done initially by just the tech team, and then we picked up, and that was a great practice. We didn't really bear fruits of that early on in the first 3-4 months, but later on it became so popular that a lot of companies now started replicating that and seeing a lot of good success, where you use that opportunity to not just announce someone great who joined you, but also talk about Rippling and how we are like growing, etc. So all of those smaller nuances sort of had this like crazy multiplier effect. And like now, as compared to what it was earlier, whenever we post a job, we get like more than 1,000 applications
Oh
within a
my
few
God.
days itself.
Okay. And I mean, who better to do your branding than your founder, right? And also, I don't know how many people will get this, but your competitors are really helping drive the brand because there's so much that happens on Twitter with what their activities are that I think people always know Rippling, right? Because your competitor is doing something. But anyway,
No
um,
comments there.
yeah, I know. I don't want to push you there at all. So, um, okay, so little bit about you then, right? We'll talk a little bit about you. So you said you were sort of in the IC role, and now um, even with Revolut, you joined, you're the only person, and both you've transitioned into a managerial kind of role. And I think a lot of people who have not done this transition, right? They may want to know what has been the toughest part of this transition. What has challenged you the most?
I think one of the big factors, I'll talk about two or three big things, but the biggest one for me personally has been people management skills. A lot of people actually underrate that, at least in India, because, fortunately or unfortunately, we get pushed into a people management role without having ever being trained to actually do that. There's no L&D, there's no prior warning around what it actually comes with that. Everyone wants to naturally grow into a managerial role without realizing the pros and cons, the amount of weight you have to deal with in terms of like everyone's emotions, etc. So I went from being an IC at Revolut to becoming a team lead, and then the head of recruitment, and then managing global teams of recruitment, which was my last role. In totality, I had like 15 people that I was managing across the globe, and there were people from Spain, Poland, UK, India, and like Ireland and other parts of the world that worked with me. So obviously there was this very crazy amount of learning, and like just that urge to understand how to manage people. And all of a sudden I saw myself trying to like subscribe for newsletters from people who were like executive coaches, etc., who would teach about how to like sort of build these qualities of empathy and understanding people's emotions, because I obviously never thought that it is going to be so tricky. So that's one big one. And even now, I think it's been a very like a new sort of an experience even at Rippling, because now I have Revolut was fully remote, by the way. So like at the end of the day, it was still looking at someone on the
Yeah.
screen and seeing. Rippling, on the other hand, is hybrid, and we meet each other thrice a week. So now I have to like sit with them and see. At times people cry in front of me, at times someone like come and tell me, hey, I'm done with this or whatever. And it's obviously a very different experience. So I think that's one big very very difficult experience that has been for me, in terms of like just overall understanding of how to manage people and how to like sort of build that candor, etc. So that's one. Beyond that, I think the executive stakeholder management in terms of dealing with CXOs, and I did a lot of that early on in my career, which helped me to a certain extent. But when you are helping someone find a job versus when you're there helping them hire people for their own teams is a very different ball game. And then obviously people, nobody is an easy stakeholder. Everyone wants a hire yesterday. You're already late. Everyone wants like the purple squirrel or the best possible candidate, and nobody can like wait for 2 extra weeks and stuff like that. So it's like it's a skill and it's difficult. Like as a leader, you are all the more responsible because like if you have 7 people on your team, even if one is underperforming, you are the one who's questioned. So how to build that camaraderie where you're dealing with the right folks at the right time, giving them enough information, etc. And lastly, for me, because I've worked in global ecosystems, the big challenge for me has been to understand global culture and nuances of each country, how people operate, what they expect, how are they expected to talk and deliver certain sort of news, etc. All of those have been like a big learning. And again, as a leader, you have to do a lot more of that. So like a lot more challenging on that part.
Then my follow-up would be on this, right? Because you've done a lot. I don't think most people sitting in India would have interacted with a lot of global, whether it's candidates or even a team. And I think you've been fortunate that you've done that at both your previous roles. So if there's just one sort of cultural or functional difference in hiring that stood out, you could just do India versus non-India. Is there something that really stands out?
uh, I think the big one is just the transparency and the authenticity. It's super different. It's like 180 degrees different from what you see in India. And that's very unfortunate because one, like most Indian companies don't respect recruiters so much. Recruiters can't even dream of having a seat at the table, especially when they are ICs and not even a leader or whatever. You can't, like, unless they are working in a very small setup where there's just 2 or 3 recruiters, then obviously they have access to leaders, but they don't get access to leaders and their thoughts, etc. So, just that mutual respect that you have with the stakeholders, that does not exist, or even with candidates for that matter. Whereas if you even look at US or UK or any other European country for that matter, the amount of transparency, authenticity, the mutual respect they have for recruiters, also the kind of people who end up taking up recruiting jobs, their backgrounds, where they come from, all of that is very different. So naturally, they are also a lot more sharper. They have pretty strong skill sets to be able to hold conversations with senior leaders. So it kind of works both ways.
Both
I
ways.
understand that. But I think India is, unfortunately lagging behind there. And recruiters, I think, need to step up. And it's high time where people understand that their, sort of decisions, they are, just their day to day tasks, etc., are also super important. And to call these out very eloquently and openly to their leaders and just the India ecosystem where they get like they get enough ears that like listen to them and pay enough attention to them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, personally as well, right? I've not done anything in HR until the last 3 years. And what I've noticed is it's treated very much as a very transactional role.
Yeah,
And it's sad, right? It's a pity because um, everyone knows that especially in the early stages, I'm talking about startup, it's the
yeah,
team that is your company.
yeah,
And if you do not want to set up processes, if you do not want to listen to people who are, helping you recruit, how will your company grow? It always
yeah,
baffles me that it's treated either very casually or like people are just not listened to, right?
yeah,
And there's no process set up, and everything is very ad hoc. Um,
yeah,
I mean, I'll tell you one thing, right? So we do assessments, right? So sometimes a company will create an account on our website at like 8 a.m. and this is literally a very well-known brand. At 8 a.m. they create the account, and at 10:30 a.m. they're doing a campus hiring. Okay, I'm very grateful that they didn't even have to talk to us and they did,
yeah,
spend money on our platform. But it also tells you the lack of preparedness, right? So
yeah,
I think, and I'm sure it's not the person who's executing it. It's just someone from the org that needs the hiring. They say, look, I need this done now.
yeah,
And then they just have to hustle, right? It really surprises me that they do it that way. And so I think what you're
yeah,
saying, I think if also the leaders empowered recruiters, gave them a seat at the table, and then said, okay, let's look at a process. Let's not firefight all the time.
yeah.
I'm sure that, something much better would emerge
Yeah,
in
it's
how
really
they.
sad. And I often talk about it with my founder friends and some VC friends that I have, where you talk to any founder, maybe even yourself, if I ask you today, beyond, building a great product and having a solid business model or a revenue model, anyone will say top 3 problems, hiring is definitely one of them. 100%. Yeah. And everyone universally agrees to that. Yet they end up hiring someone who, one, is not capable enough to be a solo recruiter for them, to even say seat at the table. Like, let's not even go there. But giving that importance to hear them out and help them, like, give them a, you know, space where they can call out their opinions and suggestions. Nobody even does that. Very few people actually do. And that's like the saddest bit, where, as you said very rightly, that everyone's treated as a very transactional or an operational person, where I'm telling you, go and do this, just go and do that, that's all,
Yeah.
that's your job. And then obviously you end up getting below par talent. You end up getting people who are not happy. They just join because this recruiter somehow convinced them to do that job. And you will then end up either replacing them or replacing the recruiter itself. And you that's a vicious cycle you go in, and
Yeah.
you'll end up struggling to, like.
Yeah. Sort of what actually, I mean, one last thing and stop about this, but what um, surprises me is I'm not even saying do the sort of generosity, right? Do it because it's a nice thing. I'm saying practically, for
Yeah.
purely rationally speaking, for your own company, for maximizing your shareholders' value, right? Which is what
Yeah.
companies are for. You do this the right way. You give the recruiter context. You listen to them. It will help your team, right? I'm not even saying do this so that they feel better. But
Yeah.
anyway, it seems like the message is lost. All right. Okay, so we are an AI product. So there will be one AI question. And so I'm going to ask you one AI question and we'll move on after that. Um, Actually, my thesis is that AI will automate many jobs, right? Many, many more jobs than people are prepared for. So I think there will be less work for recruiters to do in terms of hiring. And I also feel that a lot of the work that the recruiters do, entry level, right? Entry level recruiters do, will get automated away. So it's a bit of a double whammy, right? You have fewer
Yeah.
tasks to do, and also the tasks that you do yourself are also getting automated.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts, and how do we navigate this?
Yeah, that's a great one. It's actually something I think about a lot, because, like everyone else, I'm myself scared about, okay, how is AI going to impact like my function overall, and the expectation that leaders are going to have from me as well. I think that's true. Recruiters' jobs are going to get a lot more strategic, I feel. There's going to be much fewer recruiters, that are going to do very, very specific key level hiring, is what, my belief is. One, you're already seeing a lot of companies going very lean. And with that, the need for an in-house recruiter, or even having a team of recruiters itself, will go down drastically. And secondly, I feel, you know, companies are going to focus heavily on talent density with the advancement and the advent of AI, and overall just the technological advent that we've seen. I feel way more than what you see today, at least in India, a lot of companies are going to focus very, very heavily on density or the quality of talent that gets hired. So obviously the need for TAs will reduce, but also there will be a very strong demand for TAs that have like never really needed to kind of do something which is beyond core recruitment, in terms of having strong relationships with, like, candidates, things that technology can't do. Like today, I can like proudly say I have 30,000 connections, but if I only know 300 of them personally who will like on one call be open to take any job that I pitch, no point of having those connections. So like, I think recruiters will have to start focusing more on things that like you can't really, replace by technology, which is like having very strong foundations around network, around knowing the right folks for the right job, having very strong connections with senior leaders who are going to be tough to hire purely by sending like robotic messages and stuff like that. So I think some of those things will start taking a big turn, where companies will hire one very senior leader to run the show, and they will be able to like run the mandate for that entire organization, rather than have like a team of 100 recruiters or whatever. I feel that's where the world will go. But again, like, it's tough to predict because things are changing every week, and we can only wish and hope that it doesn't take a turn towards the south.
Yeah, I mean, but I think even though things are changing, what you're saying is fundamentally right. And ultimately, if you want to hedge, your hedge should be things that technology cannot do, right? I mean, even if you have a model that is an LLM model that's 10x as powerful, exactly what you said, right? If you have connections, if you have good relationships, however good AI becomes, I think that will not be replaced. And so that is a sort of the unchanging thing, right? So I think we have to fix that and then work around that, and then you probably are protecting some sort of a defense around you.
Yeah.
All right, so we've coming to the tag end. which means I'm going to. I know you know all these talk shows, right, where they do these quick fire questions. Something similar to that, but there's no gift hamper to give you, and there's no. It's not going to be a time limited thing. But I'm going to ask you a few shortish kind of questions, right? So let's see if you could ban one overused phrase in hiring or HR forever, what would that be?
Let me get back to you.
Very good, very good.
I mean, I accept it. I sometimes overuse it myself, but it's a job where you have no choice. You are so dependent on everyone's like.
Okay. All right. So this is what is one mishire that taught you the most as a recruiter, without naming names and all that, obviously, but
Uh, but I've had quite a few mishires, by the way. I must have hired more than I think 1,500 people myself individually over the a span of my recruiting career. So definitely, at least 10% of them were mishires. One of these taught me to not trust my own, network blindly just because
uh,
someone is putting in a word. So I once hired someone because someone put in a very strong word. Turns out they were super tight with that person. I obviously was close to this person, so it's not like we didn't interview that candidate. We obviously went through the process, but it was more of a 50-50 call where you end up leaning towards a yes more than a no purely because someone is vouching for them and you trust that someone. And more than my recruiter gut instinct, which told me, hey, don't do this, you're going to regret. I trusted that person's advice and I was like, let's give this a chance. And I really regretted that later because I saw it coming and it was in my control to stop. But I took a bet and obviously it went down south. So I regretted it later.
okay. So okay, that's a good one. All right. Now this we look at. I know VCs have this concept of an anti-portfolio. Maybe you know this. These are companies that they did not invest in, which then became very successful. So the equivalent of that here is across all your TA jobs. Is there a candidate that you lost and you were gutted to lose? Again, not naming names, but even if you tell us a bit of a story about the process and how close it was, and then how
uh,
horrible you felt after that.
Man, this is a tough one because every time I think of this one, this has been one of the
Okay,
biggest
you have
regrets.
it sounds like one of some ex relationship story, right? Because I said this, and then your eyes were like, oh no, I'm not. I don't want to rekindle my thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's like every time I think of that person, I love them, but I hate them equally for doing what they did. So it's like one of those, like, as you said, it's one of those that you don't want to talk about. So basically, it was a head of growth role at one of the companies I worked with. This role went on for more than 6 months, actually, and it's one of the longest I've had to work on. And this was something that I worked on myself, senior director plus level position, almost like a VP level role. Pretty, senior, like, just to give you an idea of it, it was close to 2 CR sort of a package in terms of just the cash component, not even talking about equity and stuff. Super big for us to kind of get that right. We ended up getting one candidate super excited. This person wasn't looking out. I spent close to a month to just convince them to agree to go through the process and then decide if they want to do it or not. So I do this thing with senior leaders where a lot of them are like, I am not even looking out. And especially if they're great, they'll be like, I'm not interested. I'm happy
Yeah.
wherever I am. So you have to sell to the level where they like sort of have no option but to go through the process and then say no. So I like literally sold that to that person. They agreed to go through the process and ended up liking what we are trying to sell and the overall experience with meeting with founders and the various stakeholders they had to meet. The process itself had more than 10, 11 rounds, so obviously it took like more than 2 months, close to 2 months in fact. And then the next part was like, doing the offer negotiation. And at that level, there's not a lot you can offer. Like, no company is going to offer 4 CR or whatever. So you can't expect like pretty big hikes. And then, like, for the uninitiated at that level, the percentage hikes is not a thing. It's mostly about the overall package and the growth trajectory, etc. People can't expect 40-50% hikes, right? Because the base is so high. So it was all about giving them an offer that they can't reject. We did that, and they rejected the offer. We went back and negotiated again, and they again rejected. This happened 4 or 5 times, and each time we had to get multiple approvals. So it took 2 weeks to get through that stage. So it took 2 more months to finally give them what they actually wanted, and this was literally ticking each and every box that person had. This candidate signed the offer and then eventually ended up withdrawing. It took 6 months of my life, which I am never getting back. But the amount of learning I got from those 6 months has actually helped me tremendously. So every day or every time I think of that person, I thank them for giving me that opportunity because I learned quite a bit. But I also regret not being able to close that person. And that's like one big regret. That's a super popular person in the market. Obviously, they've done very, very good work. They are at a CXO level position, obviously. So I don't want to name them. But obviously it's a regret that I couldn't close that one. And I learned quite a bit through just that one experience of over 6 months of chasing them over and over and over again. Eventually, I think the win was I got them what they wanted, and it was a tough internal negotiation for me to get them what they want. But because they did not end up joining the business, obviously there's that massive regret that I have.
I mean, you're very sweet and you're looking at the whole glass half full and saying they taught me all these lessons. But swear to God, I have not done this much for even an enterprise sale. Okay. You're saying that you've done 6 months of back and forth and more. I mean, the worst part is that they agreed, they signed, and then they
Yeah.
withdrew, right? Uh,
Yeah, and like that person is a gentleman, by the way. So I don't like.
oh, I
I
don't
may.
want to know who the sharks are then. If the
Yeah,
gentleman
I
is behaving like this,
I mean I don't. This person, if they ever listen to this podcast, they will probably figure it's them. So I want to obviously
no,
be
no,
nice,
yeah, I would never. Yeah.
but it's and you mentioned about enterprise sales, like that's exactly how it feels. Some of these
Mhm.
CXO roles go on for months, and like it feels worse than like losing an enterprise client. So yeah, that's how actually it is like.
All right. So we come to the last question, and this is just asking you if I think it's sort of tapping into your hobbies and so on. So if you weren't a recruiter, professionally, what do you think you would do? What I know from the conversation is you would not get back into finance. So that's one industry out. But what else would you do?
I think quite a few options. I'm someone who's always been very passionate about psychology and all of that. I could have probably been a psychiatrist, I think. I am very big, or used to at least be big, follower of sports, especially football. A big Man United fan, having bad times these days, but, still a loyalist. And I always wished and hoped I would get into a managerial role like football management and analytics and data and all of that, probably because of my background in product and data. So that was
Mhm.
very natural. And then not a lot of people know, but I actually, when I was growing up, I used to, aspire to go into the field of ophthalmology, very, very specifically.
Wow.
I've always been very fascinated, by that like sort of stream. But I didn't even take science when I was studying. I was a commerce student, so it was super funny that I used to tell people, "Hey, hey, a dream hai ye karna hai," but I was nowhere close to what the reality was. So I had these three options that I thought I will pick, and but look where life has got me.
Dude, I know that we moved away from doctor and engineer, but like people still would say something like product or whatever, right? Entrepreneurship. You have said football manager and ophthalmologist. Okay, I mean that is like you pick a book of all the career options and you pick a random page and just put your hand on them. You
Yeah.
get two because there's nothing in common between them and they're extremely niche. So clearly it is
Honestly, if
something you
you,
thought about because there's no way you could have come up with that on the spot. It's something that you've lived with your entire life.
I've thought about that more than recruiting, to be very honest. And I ended up doing this and building a core competency in something that I never imagined I would do. So I'm a very random person that way, and I'll
I
say
mean,
that.
you are a man of many stripes because you like, oh, I'm very careful about my career. And then, I spent 3 months reviewing, researching everything. I was also thinking about my exit options at one end. And that is when the interview started. In 1 hour, you're like, I'm very random. I want to do ophthalmology.
So these used to be things I wanted to pursue when I
Yeah,
was
yeah.
young, and now obviously I'm a lot more career conscious and all of that. Now today I won't do anything stupid like that, but there were days where so I've never been pretty good in my academics and stuff. I used to be a very average, student. So I always knew I have to pick something and hope that I excel and make enough money to feed my family is all. But just life happened and God's been kind. So here I am.
Yeah. All right. Excellent. Thank you so much, Saqib. I mean, for agreeing to be the first guest on the show. We plan to run a lot of them, but this will, however long this runs, will be memorable to me and to the team. Thanks for being such a sport and taking time out on Friday evening. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure. Appreciate it.
yeah. See you. Bye.
See you.